All right, it being 6:30, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. And, happy December. Take a roll call. Mary Foley. Here. Gordon Brewster.
Here.
Peter Morton.
Here.
Steve Philbrick. Here. Chris Olney.
Here.
And Laura Tennant. Here. And Sarah Creighton's here. I think we're recording. Can you just confirm that?
It said it was.
Okay, great. And this meeting's being recorded. So this is now we're gonna open the continued public hearing for 9 Proctor Street. We'll take a motion to open the continued public hearing. So moved. Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
Hi.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Great. Oh, finally, my thing just downloaded. So this is a application for the cut and fill at 9 Proctor Street under the Earth Removal section of the bylaw. And why don't the applicant just refresh our memory, because not everybody was in person last time. So Mark or your engineer just want to summarize what you're doing.
Sure. Before Dan from Warren Cameron summarizes what's happening from an engineer's point of view, I'll just remind everybody that the Comparados prior to the night have been to the Conservation Commission, and as I mentioned to those who were at the site visit, the order of conditions is issued. We also went to the zoning board for 2 special permits to enable the Comparados to install a swimming pool and obviously to pull the house back away from the harbor and build a new house. And we had to do that because it's a non-conforming property. Slightly less than 90,000 square feet that's required. It has non-conforming frontage, and the existing house is non-conforming with respect to setback. That's going to be corrected when the new house is constructed. So those permits are in place, and our last stop is here on account of the fact that the new house and the improvements that are being planned will necessitate slightly exceeding the amount of fill and the amount of cut. And Dan can explain that much better than I.
So I have a few figures. Sure. Kind of a breakdown of the cut fill analysis of the site, with the second page being a color coded site plan. So if you take a look, you can see on the second page.
Can you just speak up, and I'll make sure you say your name, so
Sure.
the
For the
record.
record, my name is Dan Severs with the Warren Cameron Group. I'm a civil engineer working with Comparados. I put together this breakdown showing you how to keep the chemical analysis that we had in the permit application. Manchester by the Sea zoning bylaw, earth removal and filing regulation specifies exclusion areas authorized by exclusion areas, authorized buildings being one of them. When we first interpreted this regulation, we only excluded proposed dwelling footprint, the authorized dwelling as we know it to be, while including the existing foundation area, while including the area of the existing foundation, which would require a lot of fill. This resulted in a much higher fill volume. As you can see in the second row on the first page, that is how we analyzed it with how we saw it fit from the regulations. As you can see, it came out to be 753 cubic yards of fill, which seems like a lot. But that's because we're not including all the fill for the existing foundation that needs to be filled in. So when you actually include both the foundation that is proposed to be cut down and the foundation that's existing to be filled. And the first row there, you can see we come up with a net fill of only 111 cubic yards. So I think that kind of explains why the number was so large. But when you take into account the whole site and the balancing of both foundations, it comes to be more of an even cut fill of the site.
Okay, and you just explain, it's hard for people who are online
Yeah,
to
sure.
see your figures, so can you just kind of walk us through?
Sure.
Again, if you're gonna fill the existing house foundation
Yeah, so the existing
and
foundation,
remove, how much material for the proposed dwelling?
I broke it out in the table here. So if you're only analyzing the proposed foundation or the proposed dwelling's footprint, you come up with 642 cubic yards of cut. When you analyze just the existing foundation, where we are also proposing a pool, which takes away some of the fill that was in there, you're coming up with 563 cubic yards of fill. Those two kind of balance each other, and when you're excluding both of them, you come up with a larger fill amount.
Is material that you're gonna take away, gonna be used on the site, or is it gonna be removed from the site and with a different kind of material coming
For the
in?
most part, most of the material, if it's good enough material, it will be used on site elsewhere.
Okay. But if it's ledgy and rocks and that kind of thing?
Yeah, that would probably be used somewhere else on site, not be structural fill or not be used for certain reasons.
I did have one question, for the architect, and that is, what's the,
Architects are also present online.
okay, great, or maybe the applicant.
We have Carrie and Tom.
Okay, just, what's the finished height from the courtyard of the house?
Do you want to answer that, Carrie? I don't have the numbers.
Who's muted?
You're muted.
Carrie, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Let me just get an accurate number for you. 1 second.
Can you read it? Can you read it? Small number. We did share that. I'll mention that. You did get the house plan, right? I think it says 26 and 3/4.
So the reason I'm asking, and,
26 and 6 3/4.
26,
Okay.
Yeah.
what is it, 26?
26 and 6?
No, so the max height,
26 feet,
Okay.
6 inches and 3/4.
Yes,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Right, because you need, the reason for asking is that you are not gonna measure that from the courtyard, you're gonna measure it from the average of the existing grade, which has a big slope. So often we see it with the opposite, where the slope is this way and the house gets to be higher on the street side because there's a slope. But now in this case, you've got a big divot. So your grade from which you're gonna measure the height of the house, the building inspector is gonna measure the height of the house, is gonna be the average of the existing grades where the house
Yeah.
meets it.
Correct. The Morin Group calculated the average grade plane,
Right.
which we used to make sure that we were under the height limitation.
So that, I think we will be just reminding the building inspector of that, because it's the opposite of what we usually see. Which, so it sounds like you considered that.
Yes.
Correct. Sorry, Carrie Byrne with Catalano Architects. I just wanted to jump in and note that the average base plane is noted on the elevations at that elevation 21.85. And you can see it on the west elevation. It's noted on there. So we did calculate that with the Moore and Cameron group and have verified that with respect to the overall max height of the house.
And then Laura, I know you had some questions about the steps and the protection for the oaks that are there.
Do you want me to ask questions now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking, well, I went back after the site meeting to take a look at the regulation. And where it applies, and, so it talks about, working with the natural topography and protecting views to the site. Obviously, there's the health, safety, and welfare, minimize negative impacts, including stormwater management, surface drainage, sounding site buffers, preservation of view, light, and air. So, so one of the areas that I was looking at, and I can see this is the civil engineer's plan. You have a landscape architect on with UIC, so one thing I'm wondering, is this the landscape architect's plan, and is there going to be some refinement of the grading? Because my questions have to do with, for instance, the oaks. Hard to tell from this plan exactly which ones they are, but I know you're planning to retain some of those trees, and while they're outside of the line of disturbance, they're not far outside, so their vertical root zone could be within that zone. I also just had a question about the 3-bay garage and the grading around that, which is filling in quite a change to the slope as it's facing, I guess, northwest, if this plan is oriented north. So you're doing a few feet of filling there, and then we're talking about a 3-story garage, which is going to have the 3 stories exposed to the kind of water side there. And some trees will be retained, and I know you're planting other trees, but it does seem like on this kind of north facing slope is where most of the change in the site is happening, particularly with that purple fill and the exposure of the garage, which is retaining. Even though you're not doing as much fill there, the garage that's retaining. And what the kind of visual impacts would be from that sight line, and, you know, sort of working with the existing natural topography, and what the answer is for the trees to be protected. So this could be a question for the civil engineer.
I
or
think
for
the best
landscape
person to
architect.
answer this is probably Mike DeRosa.
Oh, okay.
From-
Joe,
Joe, yeah.
He obviously represented the project before the Concom.
Yeah,
Yeah, so for the record, Mike DeRosa, Environmental, we did the work, the project with the conservation, filed the notice of intent, and got the order of conditions. So the Conservation Commission is having us save all the native trees, so all the red maples or red oaks are being saved. It's just the invasive trees that are being removed. So I think you're asking specifically about the.
yeah, specifically about the red oaks that are kind of this area of the slope. So if you're, you know, from the pool,
Yeah,
kind of northwest corner of the site,
yeah.
a little bit down. So those are staying. Yeah, I was just wondering if you'd factored in the kind of root protection zone for those.
Yeah, there'll be-
grading.
Yeah, we have an arborist who's working on the project, who's gonna be
Okay.
managing the removals
Mhm.
and protecting all those. We're using a lot of wood chips on the root masses so
Yeah.
that, you know, there won't be compaction.
Yeah.
things like that.
Okay. So I think that that addresses my question about the ecology. Thank you,
Mhm.
Mike. And then the other one was more of a visual impact from looking at it from, you know, sight lines from kind of coming around the harbor on Beach Street, and from basically, you know, this side of the peninsula. And because this, I think, is where the more dramatic changes are gonna happen, and are gonna be a visual impact.
I mean.
Yeah, don't you have, just to, can I just add a second piece to that, which is,
Yeah.
looks like the back of the garage is, a big retaining
retaining
wall.
wall,
And then you
that's
also
3
have a
stories high.
retaining wall off the, if I read this correctly, off the,
Of the
north
house
side of the
itself.
house, right?
Chris Comparado, owner. I'm gonna ask Tom to address the architecture of the garage, both from the courtyard and the backside of the garage. And then I'm gonna ask Joe, landscape architect from Stimson, to address the landscape around the garage, the terrain around the garage. So maybe we could just do it in those two orders. First, the architecture in the courtyard, and then the landscape around that garage. Would that be helpful, Tom and Joe?
Absolutely, Chris. Sure. First, I want to just make one slight correction. The garage is 1.5 stories on the courtyard side and 2.5 technically on the north side facing the abutter. As you may know from the site walk, the garage is more or less located where there's an existing structure outbuilding, and we've put the garage on that area to retain the ability to get into the garage from the south. And we think coming down the driveway, looking at it from the courtyard and the majority of the view, you're really seeing a 1.5 story building. And then on the backside where the grade is falling away, you do see a taller building, but it's screened with some of the existing trees that are remaining. And then Joe will get into what's happening in terms of planting along the edge to screen it, but it's tied into the ground. The lower level is clad in the same material as the retaining walls in the site to try and anchor it into the site and break the height down. And it's really a 1.5 story building on a stone podium, which is supporting the grade change.
Thanks, Tom. Joe Waller, Stimson Landscape Architects, just building on what Tom is describing. Yeah, the building is positioned at the edge of a slope as was identified earlier. And what we're trying to do with the topography is carefully grade that to match the natural forms of the topography, wrap it around that kind of northwestern corner of the garage. We're also using a retaining wall on the northern end to help get grade up along the building, to get vegetation higher and integrate this into a reconstructed riverfront bank, working with Mike DeRosa and team on a natural plant restoration. Those plants will continue up and become the foundational plants on that side of the building and garage.
Yeah, that's a question to Joe. So Joe, is this your landscape grading plan at this point, or is this a kind of preliminary civil plan?
No, we have been working closely with the civil engineers on the grading, going back and forth with the whole project team. So we're actively collaborating on the grading.
Okay, so it sounds like it's still a work in progress now. I'm just wondering about, the steep slopes coming around the northwest side of the garage, and it doesn't really look like it's working. It doesn't feel like it's mimicking natural topography yet, but if you say that's what you're working on.
Yeah, I do feel like it is. We have a range of slopes there, so we're working on not making it feel like a uniform graded slope, but changing our gradients from as steep as 3 to 1 and then sloping out to more gentle areas so that it does carefully knit in, and our proposed grading is tying in well with existing grades and protecting the critical root zones of those trees we're looking to protect, as well as helping to nestle the building within its site.
And there's another constraint which we are dealing with, and Joe's figured this out in the grading, and that is we're working to retain the existing Title V field that abuts the end of the garage, and that's constraining the amount of grade change that can happen there anyway, because we have to work with that field that's already in place.
So it's served by septic, not sewer.
Right.
Mhm. I just had a couple more follow-up questions if I could, which was, so you're talking about these slopes, some of which are steeper, 3 to 1, which is about as steep as you can make it for a natural grade. You're working with Mike on revegetating those slopes to make sure that they will be stable and vegetated afterwards.
That's correct.
Okay, and then how do you service the storage that's coming out from the north? I don't see a drive down there. Maybe I see a kind of a walk zone.
Yeah, there are a
Yeah.
series of pathways. This is lighter storage, kayaks, and landscape equipment coming down from that lawn on the northwest side. There's slightly wider footpaths that allow small access. And then there's a footpath that continues along that northern side of the property.
Okay. Do we have an elevation in our packet that shows?
Yeah.
We do, okay, that's that one. That shows.
And one thing I'd like to add, if I may, and that is that we're also going to be using the space under the garage to house some of the equipment to get it away from the outside of the building, which will help to really reduce the sound impact and shield any unnecessary equipment being seen from off the site.
Is that building equipment or what kind of equipment do you mean?
Generator, for example. So the generator will be there and it'll be vented through a thimble, so it'll be very quiet when and if it needs to be in use. With the proposed geothermal system, all the HVAC equipment is inside the building.
I will say just a comment, this diagram is so helpful because I really wondered with the cut and fill before, it sounded like it was totally off, a lot more fill, so this is making more sense to me from that point of view, with both dwellings factored in now. Thank you.
Okay, and then I have a question on the floor plan that we see. There's a light yellow, it's upside down, it's small. And there's a light yellow and a dark yellow. What is the distinction between those two? And yeah, green, light green and dark green?
So I believe,
Is that like a path?
If-
Is
if
that
I'm-
the pathways?
I'm not
I
sure
can
what.
share,
you're
when I
referring
can
to.
share.
Yeah, maybe if you share, but I believe if you're talking about this plan and the highlights, the highlight is the existing house.
This might be a
No,
different
this
plan.
is what
than
I'm
you
showing. Can you, this is what I'm looking at. It's upside down and I apologize for that, but that's this,
Oh.
what is this?
No, it's not upside down. Well, north is up.
But the numbers are upside down, so.
What's this?
This light and on my screen, this shows is light green and a darker green. What are those, this colors, what are the distinctions of those colors? Is that a pathway? I'm following up on Laura's question of
Yeah.
access to the lower part of
Right.
the unit.
The area in white is what's proposed to be a pathway. I think, I'm not quite sure which drawing this is, but Mike might be able to clarify. I think the distinction here is everything page up of that is the mitigation or restoration planting, and then these planting areas in here are landscape plantings beyond that kind of restoration
And what is
area.
the surface of that white area?
The white area provides access to the lower level of the garage. This is where we have that storage that we were talking about, and then this provides pedestrian access along this northern side of the building. We also have a lower level egress at this point in the building, so that provides.
So Joe
Access.
or Mike, can you remind them what the surface material is? I think it was wood chip or?
Yeah, within the buffer zones, it's wood chip and it transitions to mown turf as it moves towards the garage and then up around the northwest side of the building.
I'm gonna scroll through.
Can I ask a question about the fill?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Do you have any idea how many truckloads this equates to?
Previously, with what we had provided you, it seemed like there'd be a lot more just because we weren't showing you the whole picture because of how we were.
Can you just speak up so people on the line can hear you? The
I'm not
question was how many truckloads of
I'm not sure
film?
exactly how many truckloads it would take, but I'd estimate it anywhere between 5 and 10 at maximum. I don't think it'd be a real big number. You're not gonna see many trucks coming in and out for fill needs.
Yeah, that was the question. If it's 50 or.
No.
Okay. And you mentioned you're gonna have a geothermal, just out of curiosity, where is that gonna be? Where are the wells? Oops, I don't have, I don't plan.
Where are the wells?
They are to the southwest of the house. Let me. Dan, do you have the plan that shows them on there?
But they are on the.
Yeah. I don't know if you can see this, but in your plans, the geothermal wells are on the west side of the house, the southwest side, and we're showing 3 wells. 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
Okay. So they're the black dot in unison when they can.
And then are they showing the clean out covers? That is. Is that something different I'm looking at?
I'm not sure what you're looking at.
I'm just looking at it's a map in the packet, what it's called, but it's showing,
Yeah, and they're all.
Yeah, they're all below grade. You're not gonna see them. Three.
okay.
Yes.
You may be thinking of the inspection courts. For the.
Oh, septic tank, I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right, one other, I'm just going back to my, concern about height. I'm looking at the height of the garage at 23.
Are you able to show the elevations?
What?
Are you able to show the elevations that you're looking at?
It's a little hard, but yeah. Share, sorry. That's not working. Oh, yeah. Okay, so this is the garage.
So that's from the north side?
So I
No,
see
that's
that
not
being
north.
23 feet. So that's above the courtyard. So that's in excess, I would believe, of your 25 feet for accessory.
It's not an accessory building. It's connected to the main building, so it's all one building.
To be connected, I think you have to be connected by a living wall, if that's what you're talking about.
I think.
It's connected by a conditioned space. We've since made an update. The connector you see here is no longer open. It's enclosed with fenestration. So there's a heated connection between the garage and the house.
Peter, can you show the facade on the other side?
Yeah, I'm trying to see, do we have is there a drawing of the,
The
this is
side.
of the back side? This is loading,
So that's,
the back side of the garage and that retaining
that's
wall.
it.
I can share a continuous one if you'd
Yeah,
like.
that'd be awesome. Thank you. Hold, let me unshare here and I'll have to give you rights if I can. All right, Carrie, you should be able to share.
Okay.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
And the max height at this 26 feet 6 3/4, which is overall elevation 54.96, is the ridge height. The average grade plane baseline around the house is the 21.85 overall feet, which nets out at 33.1 overall feet in height from the average grade plane to the max ridge. So that was a number earlier that I think you were looking for just as a reference, not from the courtyard, but just in terms of the overall from the average.
And Terry, we updated the backside. There's no longer 3 garages, correct?
Correct. We can resubmit that update. This is the just submission package with the overall, and I just wanted to reference the same thing that you might have in front of you. So.
That's the question.
Mhm.
So this, the top elevation, which is what you'd see the north facing side, you'll have one fewer, or you'll have some change to the number of garage doors at that bottom level. And then what is an open breezeway now will be enclosed. So then whatever that length is from one end of the, the back of the screen porch to the end of the garage is basically the first story, that's a solid building wall, and at the basement level, cell building wall built into the slope.
I think
That's-
that, yeah, can I just clarify what I think is that this is because you're filling. You can do this,
You're filling the breezeway.
right? No, I don't mean, I mean filling the landscape. It's
I'm-
basically allowing this significant massing along and that's what you
From the
see
north
from
side.
Beach,
Yeah, that's the
from
visual
Beach Street.
effect that I'm.
Actually, if I may, the bottom of this elevation that you see where where the 3 doors are, we're gonna have fewer doors. That's actually more or less the natural grade. So the grade is, the design of the building is set by the existing conditions and the grade there. We can't fill there because we're too close to the buffer zone, so we're working with the existing grade. Where the fill is on the opposite side, where we're filling in between the upper level garage door, that wall of the building, and the driveway and courtyard. That's where the fill happens. There's no fill happening on this view.
Other questions or take comments? Yes, go ahead, Chris.
So, this northern, elevation is gonna be what you see when you look from Beach Street across the water. And
Joe,
that's,
maybe you could talk about what it's gonna look like, because we're gonna be doing a lot of planting there.
yeah,
Whatever
nobody's-
comes
and
down has to
trees.
be, yeah, whatever
Sure.
comes down has to be replaced, but, or you can talk about it.
Yeah, I don't think you'll be able to see the house actually from Beach Street. We're retaining a lot of the existing canopy. And everything, we're putting in, I think, over 60 trees that are going back in. So that whole side of Beach Street is, and that was critical to you guys to maintain that as. well. So you
That
know,
makes me feel better.
yeah.
There is one, thing I do worry about, which is some of the neighbors have, extensive landscaping, lighting at night. So you go along Beach Street, it looks like there's an airport up there.
We will not do that, we can promise you that. That is not gonna happen.
Would you
It's gonna be
object to a
subtle and hidden
condition
in
that
there.
says that you won't do that?
Say that again?
Can we make that a condition of the special permit?
It
It's
really
gonna
was
be-
a condition of the zoning board, special permit for the swimming pool. Because lighting always comes up as an issue with swimming pools and tennis courts. And so, as you'll hear from the architects and landscape designers, it's a dark sky project. The zoning board included that as a condition.
Let's take any comments from the anybody online or in the room? Anybody from the public want to speak? Just raise your hand if you're online. Not seeing anybody. Katerina,
Katerina Gates,
speak up so that,
Katerina Gates, School Street and Desmond Avenue. I read about these owners who were trying to build the house on a non-conforming lot, and I was very interested to find out, what goes on, because we had to deal similarly with a neighbor who is trying to do that. And is there a difference between owners that they're living downtown and the owners who have a lot more land, but still a non-conforming lot? When they petition for a plan, for a.
The non-conforming lot, if I may answer.
go ahead.
Yes.
The non-conforming lot was an issue with respect to the zoning board hearing. And that was the reason we were before the zoning board. So we had to convince them that what we were proposing was not going to be more detrimental to the neighborhood than what is there currently.
Right.
And they obviously concurred.
Right, well, I personally, we live in this much smaller area of land. And our neighbor who is planning, that's why I'm bringing it up, who bought the property, and it's a very small tiny piece of land. There were trees there, they are dead now, but We always felt that they had to replant the things that they were there before, because when we bought our property, it was really, you couldn't see the neighbors on both sides. We replanted things, nobody else did it. But, so that's why my question was, do the rules apply? It doesn't matter if you're a village territory or in a.
It's hard to
bigger-
generalize any particular,
Yes, but
each
it's-
lot is
but
unique in each
still, you
circumstance.
maintain the same status for the owners,
That
for
is the intent.
neighbors, and so on. That's why I'm asking.
Okay, other comments from the board or, Laura, go ahead.
So I understand a lot better now since, I mean, it was helpful to have a site meeting and then a lot of additional information tonight, which is really helpful. I think my two remaining questions, which could probably be resolved, the rest of the board agrees with just a couple of additional, a revised rendering and maybe a plan, is really that north facing, kind of the building massing. I understand that you're not doing a lot of filling in there, and that does enable to have this, enables you to have this 2.5-story building. By the time it's connected by the enclosed breezeway, it is gonna be quite a long building wall with a potential for a significant visual impact on the north side. So I think what would give me some reassurance that it's protecting the kind of scenic harbor and the neighbors who are looking on it from that side would be a revised elevation showing the infilled breezeway and what is the base, you know, the ground story of the garage look like. And then if it's something that we could ask for, just a plan that shows the intention for the site to the north of that and how it's going to be, I mean, it can be schematic, I think, but if we had a planting plan so we could really understand what the buffer was that is going to screen that both in leaf off period and when things are in leaf. I think that would resolve my questions about the impact on from the Beach Street view and, you know, towards the neighbors looking at the north facing facade of this. I think that's where the real significant change is gonna be happening. The fact that the building's moving back on the site and that you're, you know, replacing the Norway maples and doing native plantings, those are all good things. It is still a significant change. And so I think just kind of ensuring that, it sounds like you're being thoughtful about it, but it would help we're just kind of talking about it right now. So if we had some additional information in plan and elevation, that would help me.
I did include the order of conditions. I just got it. I just.
I saw that
Yeah.
from the Concom. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just put it in this afternoon,
I
so
don't see that. And
I'm just gonna look and see.
they had some
Well,
special
if there's
conditions at the end.
specific.
ZBA.
Concom.
Yeah, page 5 starts the special conditions that are specific. I can. Here, that's that.
I think it was.
Oh.
Um,
So it's, let me just summarize the special
Yeah.
conditions. There's a construction period pollution prevention plan. Only chemically untreated wood products, which is green oak for, I guess that's the landscape materials. Tree work shall be overseen by a licensed arborist. Greenery kept as far as possible from the creek and the coastal bank. Vegetated wetlands, and no event shall be permitted in any wetland resource. All debris shall be removed from invasive, shall be removed and collected and transported off-site. Mitigation planting should be monitored for 2 growing seasons to at least 85% survivorship. Use of toxic substances for lawn, garden maintenance. Due to the proximities site, I'm summarizing here, proximity to the wetlands. Pesticides and herbicides are permanently prohibited. Organic slow release fertilizers, the only fertilizers allowed. Phosphorus levels. The applicant should place suitable permanent conservation monuments, denoting the riparian zone. De-icing chemicals shall be limited to the smallest amount necessary. Hazardous materials shall be securely stored above the FEMA flood zone. Maintain all pervious surface regularly. The surfaces remain permeable. Pool water should be treated by an UV system or other low chlorine method. And prior to the certificate of completion and upon the sale of the property to the subsequent owners, each new owner shall receive a letter to the Manchester Conservation Commission acknowledging that he or she understands the wetlands restrictions and that there were no additional alterations to the jurisdictional buffers and resource areas without express permission of the Conservation Commission. Mike,
Yeah, just the planting plan, we had a detailed planting plan, which we can easily get to you for the conservation approval, so.
It would be great if we
And
could
it's
do
all on that.
Actually, you've got Mr. Conservation Commission right here. You can get it to you.
Okay, then.
Madam Chairwoman, I was actually gonna speak up on that. I could run next door if you all need Art and get that.
It might be helpful because hopefully you're not going to suggest that we continue in order to get that plan. If we could get it tonight and that would allay your fears, I'd much rather have it than kick the can down the road again.
Every plant has been identified already, all over now.
That sounds great. I guess we were just talking about an updated rendering. Maybe that's not necessary and we could just point to that again and say what's changing in it and then have an understanding of how that will impact.
yeah,
The
I
change.
feel like architectural things are maybe a little out of our
Yeah, that's
scope.
fair. Yeah. Yeah.
So.
So maybe the planting plan would.
Yeah, and the
Get it.
issue around the breezeway is gonna be, if they don't enclose it, they won't get their height.
Understood. Totally understand that.
Now defined as
Yeah.
old lot.
So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
which,
Yeah, and I take your point on the architectural rendering, not our purview. I was really just thinking about the kind of mass of the
No,
building and
I
how we
agree.
would screen it, so the planting plan would address that. If we got it nearby, that would be great. if We could see it.
Mark, you wanna weigh in on anything we've talked about?
No, I think, gone through everything. I think the biggest concern because seeing that north elevation, but, I don't know whether it's visible from
It is,
Beach Street.
absolutely. You can see the slope there right now. It's all marked with coy rolls.
Part of the problem, I guess, is the significant clearing that took place next door, which I think is the lighted property, which we don't have any control over.
Of course.
Well, we have someone online.
Teresa,
Hi there, good evening. So Teresa Conway, 7 Proctor Street. We've talked a lot about the building location, but there's quite a long driveway that goes down to the property. Right now it's maybe it's dirt and there's rows of trees. Can you just outline what the plan is for the driveway and the trees along the driveway? Thank you.
Joe, would you like me to?
Yeah, I can address that one. Yeah, so we're proposing to keep the driveway more or less in the existing configuration. Like you said, the material is kind of a hard packed gravel soil mix. We're still working on material, but most likely upgraded to a gravel drive with a solid apron at Proctor Street. The width of the driveway is staying single travel lane. We are working with the arborist to evaluate the existing trees. Many of them are white pines, which are near the end of their effective life, as well as some Norway maples. So those trees are being considered for removal, but will be replaced with new generational long-lived trees, oaks and maples and other appropriate species to restore that canopy and also the privacy that the planting along both sides of that driveway afford the neighbors on either side as well as the overall neighborhood.
Thank you.
so I think we've heard a couple of conditions, Mark. One is the, no lighting and no,
Thank you.
and
Oh,
dark,
thank you.
any exterior lights will be dark sky compliant. The, I think we want to reiterate the, protection of the tree, existing, the trees to remain, the hardwoods that remain, the tree root. Other, things we touched on?
Hey, Sarah, this is Gordon. Just forgive me for not being there. But I was at the site last week, so I have a good visual of it here. I think Laura's point, I don't know if it's in our purview or not, but I think Laura's point about having a planting plan, particularly of that north side, I would imagine that's going to be developed as part of the program anyway, would have some relevance to us, does it not? It's for visible and just sheer coverage. Would we not want to make that a part of our condition? Maybe not the architectural comment, but the land and the site plan would be a good idea.
Yeah, what we're doing, is Laura's right now looking through the Concom folder to kind of clarify the planting plan. Mike, if you want to help her, that's fine.
So here we go. So these are species,
Yeah.
quantities.
Maybe you can just summarize for all of us what the,
Can I ask you a question, Mike?
Yeah.
Is black locust considered invasive these days?
Yes,
I know it's
it
been,
is.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's the primary one, from black locust and Norway maple.
The Norway maple, so on the Norway maple here. Okay, so do you want to, here, you can,
yeah, just kind of give us a high level
Give us
summary
that.
of the numbers of trees.
Sure, trees, we've got, over 60.
60 trees, and how
trees.
big are they when they
Red,
go in?
red maple, red oak, red bud, white pine, American holly, and sweet gum. So what we're doing is we're doing some species migration, given climate change. Conservation commissions want us to start looking at bringing in some southern species that are going to be the canopy 50 years from now. So that's why the sweet gum is in there and the red bud is in there. They're both more southern species. But we've got the American holly in there, which is an evergreen, and the red oak and red maple. So those would be the big canopy species.
and the kind of extent in the area of the planting, like we were talking about the north side, so,
Yep. Yeah,
Sure,
it's all
that-
on the north side.
yeah,
Yeah,
you show the
because,
board.
oh, yeah.
I will comment,
It's
we want as much privacy. Can I just,
Not taking anything out on.
hey, Mike, I want to make a comment. From the start of this project, knowing the property and where the house sat, we want as much privacy as possible. And we know, when we walked the woods with Mike and Joe, and they educated us on how much black locust and Norway maples were on that property, when you take them all out, it is gonna open up. But we want to, as quickly as possible, replant the list that Mike just went over, because we want privacy. We don't want that north side of our property to be completely exposed to Beach Street. Like, we actually want to live back there.
We don't
and-
want any of our living space to be seen by
So,
Beach
so we
Street.
actually think eventually that north side will be a big enhancement to what you see today. Today you see the house that sits on the cliff and you see a pottery barn in the woods.
That's falling
And
apart.
I actually think that elevation is gonna look beautiful. But you're seeing an elevation without trees. So I get your comments, but our goal is to put in as many trees as
Yeah.
possible.
We're putting in over 60. They're up to your question about sizes. Minimum size is 2-inch calipers, so they're all gonna be 15, 20 inches, 20 feet tall when they go in. There's gonna be varying heights, because forests are varied heights. We don't want them all the same height. Yeah, it's along that whole north side, so that's the whole intent.
It says they'll be irrigated for one full growing season or until plant materials established. You've got a 2-year monitoring.
Yeah, we get a monitor for 2 years according to the order of conditions. We'll probably be doing it for longer. Invasive species programs are usually a 5-year program.
Mhm.
Okay,
What were the conditions that you mentioned?
I said, the
The lighting.
lighting and the
Tree protection.
tree protection.
Particular.
Yeah, and then do we want the debris, any spilled debris on the road, on the public roads the public roads should be maintained,
Right. And then, site construction hours should comply with the town bylaw. You just, reiterate that, because I don't
Yeah.
think you want any, being a residential district, any variation from that.
You could ask about stormwater, and whether the general permit.
right, so that, Mark, you wanna just take that, cause you asked Chuck?
I did get a response.
I can pull it.
Chuck, do you have it? But it,
Yeah.
again, this was filed prior to town meeting. So.
I think he said that the main triggers are 20,000 square feet or more of disturbance. We're changing the existing grade by more than 2 feet, which of course it is. The intent is if it does not trigger an NOI, which this does, or a special permit of the planning board, then DPW would do a stormwater permit. So we already have an NOI, and so the idea is that the erosion control and other requirements from the stormwater rules are included in the NOI.
So the Concom's gotta cover
Concom's
this.
gotta cover
Yeah.
And the other thing that I had wondered about was the floodplain, but at least, yeah, Mark had
I looked at that.
indicated that it was not in floodplain, and I looked at the floodplain maps and it's above the floodplain. So,
Okay, this is really helpful.
Stormwater management, a special permit of the planning board.
we remember it's been changed to the DPW if it's not a,
If it's not in front of the planning board already for a special permit.
and if it's,
Would need to do a special permit for stormwater.
No,
I don't think that's,
no, I think it's, if it's not a special permit in front of the planning board where stormwater gets reviewed by this board, or a notice of intent whereby it gets reviewed by the Conservation Commission, then it's an administrative review by the public works. I believe is how it's
well, this,
drafted.
it's not it's not running off to to a separated storm sewer. I think that's really the applicability, right? Let's see. I'm reading the old one because this application came in. So if it's land disturbance that's equal to or greater than 1 acre,
This is less than an acre.
this is less than an acre of disturbance. Activities or land uses that would require a special permit from the planning board shall not be required to obtain an independent special permit under this article. I think that it does not apply. And I'm reading the old one because this permit came in prior to, was filed prior to town meeting.
Okay,
No.
so I'm referencing the new one, which says if it's already a special permit in front of the planning board, the planning board does the special permit for stormwater.
Correct.
So, okay, so this came in.
This came in before town meeting.
Phew.
Okay, with,
I guess I'll move to close the public
Oh.
hearing.
thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now take any other discussion? Nope. I do have a motion to, accept to grant the special permit under section, 6.4 earth removal and filling with the conditions as discussed.
We're gonna see the conditions.
Yeah, we're gonna, so maybe we can, can we do the draft conditions next time, get an actual written version?
You can, but then, you shouldn't vote tonight,
And we should, yeah,
so. but
We don't meet for another
I
month
mean,
though.
you can,
Yeah,
I mean, these are the conditions you had talked about. No uplighting, all exterior lighting shall be dark side compliant. Tree protection shall be in place, in particular, the northeast corner where the relocated pathway is to be constructed.
We just call that, critical root zone. Can you put those words in there?
Okay.
Arborist, no pruning.
Site construction will comply with the town, site construction hours shall be comply with the town bylaw. Dirt, mud, and other debris shall be kept, off of, Proctor Street.
Isn't that a regulation already? Isn't there a door
Yeah, but it doesn't
regulation?
hurt to put it in the permit.
They're all-
We did that on something.
We did,
Mhm.
okay. I just didn't know if there were other things we were leaving to the.
I guess the other thing I would just, do we want to ask the staging of, of trucks be done like Singing Beach parking lot or, no, I guess it depends on the
How
season.
many,
Purview of the building
Yeah.
inspector?
yeah, it's really
Police,
not.
probably more the
Police
police, yeah.
department, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty, the number of vehicles, I mean, it'll be more daily construction pickups and stuff, but that's a long driveway, so,
That's
We made
one,
room on the drive.
yes.
okay. All right, I'm comfortable with having,
Yeah,
moving
okay,
this along. given that-
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you. Chris is making the motion to approve the special permit
Sounds like Peter.
under 6.4 with those following conditions. Peter had seconded. And I will review them. Laura and I will review them. Issue before I sign them, for any typos and so forth. Any other discussion? I'll take a roll call vote. Laura Tenney,
Yes.
Chris Olney,
Yes,
Sue Philbrick,
Yes,
Peter Morton,
Yes.
Mary Foley.
I can't vote.
Okay, and Gordon Brewster,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Great, thank you,
Thank you.
And,
Thank you.
Can I make a point here?
but I need, just comment to the,
I want to congratulate them and everybody who worked for their committees that they have the people that hired, because I've never seen a better job compared to what we're dealing with the people who got that company behind us, and we are. Yeah.
great, thank you. It's always nice to hear good comments.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
all right, we will see you, we won't see you next
See you
meeting.
next year.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
You gonna miss us?
No, I won't see you next.
is this it? Is this Mark's last meeting?
Well, on these two things.
Right,
No,
we'll see
he'll
you
be back.
2025.
Okay, yeah, I know that in our packets, there was a, notice for 7 Central Street. Mark, I believe that was in error with the dates on that, was in error. We are taking that up on January
13th,
13th.
that's correct. They filed it too late to be on this meeting's agenda, and, because of the hearing notice requirements, and then at the last meeting, we weren't gonna be able to have a quorum at the end of this month, so.
Yep, okay, given that,
Sounds good.
It was not advertised.
Sue,
Before I forget, if we could have paper plans
yes,
so that I'm not looking at that one the way I was looking at this one on my computer, it would really help.
what we've done in the past is on Thursdays, then people can pick them up in the planning board box downstairs, so you don't have to try to run them around.
Yes,
to
oh, yeah.
Us, you
Happy
can
to
come
do that.
pick them up, and you could, if people don't know, the police can let you in if you come on a Friday. And the town hall is closed, or you can ask somebody can pick them up for you, or, so you can get in on, and pick them up in the box, but yes, I agree, that would be really
It's
helpful.
just too small and too old.
And it takes a while to load.
Yeah, and then, yeah, it's really hard. Thank you. Sue. But, John, do you want to just say anything about the 7 Central, since you're here? With
Yeah,
John
thank
Hart.
you. John Harden, 54 School Street, and also with. And yes, I am a month early for the hearing. I do realize, my client is, are Edward and Arthur Lumia, I believe. Jonathan, from their office is also on Zoom, perhaps. Any case, I know, the application has been submitted, and I met some of you all on site on Monday. Thank you for coming so early in the process to see the site. And I think my presence here is really just to show how excited my client is for this project. In some ways, this is pretty exciting for the town because it's, even though it's not in the 3A district, perhaps it should be, but I won't go there. It does represent in some ways what the 3A was all about and trying to do some small development that is appropriate in our town. It's a project that proposes 3 units in the existing 7 Central property. It's, as you know, it has been a restaurant off and on for a long time. It's going to still be a cafe in front, but we are proposing 3 units, 2 in the back and then 1 up above the cafe in the front. Since this isn't a public meeting, I won't go into any more detail. But I just wondered if you had any questions from the site walk or if there's anything else that we could do to better prepare you guys for the meeting in January.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Are you concerned about the floodplain in back of the building?
So we are in the sense that it clearly is and has flooded in the past. All of the work for all of the space that would be in the units and also in the cafe will be up on the first floor level. The only space that would be down below would be storage and perhaps some mechanical space that would have to be there. But in terms of living space, it will all be above on that first floor.
And is there sufficient parking for tenants?
So according to our ordinance, it calls for 5 parking spots for 3 units. It's kind of a quirky area back there, as you all know, having been back there. There is space for 5 spaces. What we proposed in our drawing and laid out is pretty simple. 1 space is allocated per unit, which one might argue is perhaps appropriate for housing in the center of town, so close to transit. Also so close actually to the public parking, which is really just across the street and behind this building. It also takes into account a couple of spaces that are shown as piggyback spaces, but our concept there was that if people who worked in the restaurant could use those, they could be coordinated in a way if someone had to move. Not ideal, but there's also nothing in our ordinance that prevents piggyback parking. If they are, it makes sense in a way if they're assigned to the same unit or for the same purpose, which was how we were thinking about that. There is some additional space. It's really not in the property, but there is a zone behind the building that is public way or there is a right of way. So there is space there also for an additional parking spot. It's really not on our property, so I can't draw it as a spot. In addition to that, our client also owns the building to the right and the building to the left. And so there is also in our ordinance, it allows the ability to accommodate parking in lots that are close by. So that is also a possibility that we could look at for that 5th spot.
John, what's the intended size of the commercial space?
In terms of square feet, I'm not sure I have that at my fingertips. I wasn't quite prepared to talk about that.
I'm just.
But it's approximately, if you've been into the old.
Is it just the bar or
restaurant,
yeah?
It's the bar and where the seating was to the left of the front entry. But if you looked at the building, the footprint of the oldest part, right?
Yeah.
Which has a gambrel roof, that would be the cafe. Then pushing back a little bit on the left towards the rear where there's a bit more space for some seating. The folks who came to see the building also, I'm sure, noticed it's really old. The existing framing is all still in the building. some really cool, existing timbers, both as posts and beams. Not all of them are in great shape. Something that my client has always taken great pride in is sort of, in some ways, rebuilding from the inside a lot of these buildings. If you know 9 Ashland, that was essentially rebuilt from the inside out. And sometimes that's just a better solution. It can then be a building that might last another 100 years, another 200 years, right? So we're going to look very carefully at the structure of it, but to answer your question, the oldest part, really that front piece, is the footprint of the cafe.
So if you didn't go there, we can either arrange a second walk, which might be useful in January, but also you can just walk down by the fire station and along the backside there. That is the public appears to be a public right of way. Anyway, there's a transformer there, and it's very obvious that the parking spaces are marked 1, 2, 3 in front of under the deck.
That's correct.
And then you can see on the left by their dumpster or some sort of there that, 4 and 5 are right there. And that's really our jurisdiction. And there is a slight increase in square footage too, which triggers the special permit review. So it's the 4 units. I was trying to figure out, but it's essentially 4 units. It's the 1 commercial and 3 residential that in the general district triggers the special permit.
That's right. It's note 5 under the table of uses, which permits this under a special permit. Both the 4 units, but also adding volume to the existing structure. And we think we're being kind of clever here in how we're adding volume. There's a very small space on the 2nd floor that's actually internal. It's not visible from the back. It's not visible from the front. There's actually a space in between the old building and the newer part. It's flat roofed. It's a little odd, but that's how it was built. We're proposing just filling in a corner of that area in order to create enough room for a 2nd bedroom to one of the units. So that's the added volume.
Go ahead, Laura.
I had one question kind of relative to that, capturing a little volume, which is on the 1st floor, front side, 2nd floor unit.
Yes.
And we walked up the exterior stair to that unit.
Yes.
And you don't need to have an answer now, but when we meet again, I'm just wondering if that's the only access and egress from that apartment. Is there a way that you could recapture a little bit of volume on the backside to make either an interior stair or an enclosed stair to service that apartment?
That's an interesting question. We could look at that.
Okay.
Yeah. So to your point, the only access to the unit that would be above the cafe is currently an exterior stair. It exists. It's not in the greatest shape, but it's not terribly bad. Some things in the building are in worse shape. The trick would be to see where that stair
Right,
would
when it
start.
comes down, yeah.
Yeah, but we could look.
Yeah,
at that.
maybe if you could give that some thought before we meet, I think that would be a better, safer access to that 2nd floor unit.
Yeah, one tricky thing about that building, the 2nd floor above the cafe is different from the 2nd floor level.
Of course, yeah.
At the back.
Yeah, of course it is.
So,
I need to see this.
Okay, I'm gonna save the rest of this discussion for next month, but we'll welcome you back and
Thanks for the preview.
yeah, definitely just walk back there. It's pretty obvious what back there, so do take some time to go there.
Thank you for being open to let me do this.
Yeah, great. It's nice to see you. Thank you. Great. Just liaison, any liaison reports? Any of our liaisons? Okay. Correspondence, we received something from the town of Essex, several public hearing notices. There's one from town of Essex, and there's a email.
Communications.
It came at, Elizabeth Thomas sent us something essentially right 2 minutes before our last meeting.
Oh, yeah,
that we acknowledged it. Yeah. No
We did
other.
mention this in the last. meeting,
Yeah.
too.
We did, okay, just wanna make sure we don't. Let's see, okay, so,
Can I ask one quick question about the
absolutely.
correspondence regarding Essex? Why?
because we're in a budding town, we get notified.
Okay.
So,
And we,
and we have to notify them, yeah.
Thank you.
They're just gonna jump, do you guys have some business is not on the agenda, or are you here for a school project, or? School project? Well done. Can we answer any questions?
But do you have any questions in general for the?
In general, what do we do? Who are we?
I'm like, how much will it cost? Well, what cost? Putting in the bill.
Oh,
Oh, good question. Not our problem. The applicant would pay the costs, so the town does not pay any costs, and the applicant did submit a filing fee of $250.
Yeah.
So to have the pleasure of talking to us. However, sometimes, like with the big cell signaling project that we just finished, the applicant has to pay more, pay us a fee, and then we actually hire somebody who reviews the complex plans on our behalf. And the applicant does pay for that review. But we still don't pay the construction fees. So.
How do you get on the planning board?
we're elected.
yeah, you run for office.
Are you interested?
You should try it. You probably could.
I don't know.
I don't think there's a minimum age. If
Probably have to be.
you have to be
probably have
voter
to be a
age,
voter, yeah.
Maybe voter age, probably.
I don't know if there's been. Ann, you're looking,
Excellent.
do you know?
I don't.
Town clerk would know, for sure. And then, we are elected for 3-year terms. And,
Good luck.
yeah. You'll need signs. Great,
Excellent.
come
Thanks for
back.
coming.
And all our meetings are open, and you can watch us on Zoom if you.
Really like
Don't have anything better to do.
What? If you have nothing else to do. No? Okay, great, welcome. So discussion of our budget, our current status, and particularly what we want to do going forward in 2025, particularly in advance of April town meeting, which is coming right up. So let's start with the budget.
So, your budget, what I've done for this year, because changing how we operate for planning, zoning, and conservation, we've combined that into one land use department. So that we have salaries, we have my salary, we have the conservation agent salary, and we have a land use clerk, which is Shannon.
I know, I could have
Valerie right
acknowledged
there.
Shannon here in
If-
the flesh for the
And if-
first time.
Yeah, if you haven't met
Nice to
him,
meet you.
this
Yes.
is your admin person moving forward, Shannon.
Recognize
Bianchi.
you. Yeah.
So, and then we have our, and so that's standard, we just combined those salaries together. And then we have expenses, and again, what I've done is I've combined our expenses from the 3 boards. Pretty much they're very similar line items, everything from legal is in here, but professional services, telephone, postage, printing, travel, dues, that kind of thing, office equipment. So I've combined them, and then I've proposed to increase a few of them just based on, now we're running a real larger department with more tasks. So, so there's some slight increases there. So what I have retained for the planning board is professional services. We had 25,000 in there last year, We are gonna be using some of that to pay Emily's services, which you did vote for last spring. The balance will go back to the general fund, but we're proposing obvious to appropriate an additional 25,000 for next year as well, to be used for studies and other tasks as necessary.
And how much of this past year's was used?
So we had a grant through the town, and the last bill from Emily was including the, one of the studies. Yeah, so that bill was for about, let's say, 16.5, and we had about 13 left in the grant. So we're using about 3,000 out of this 25,000 right now, and we will probably use another 2,000 or 3,000 to have her finish the filings and other expenses.
Party, what's that?
with you. Yes, plus the giant party.
Great, okay. Any comments on the budget? Any, yes?
I just have a question. So legal is separate from professional services?
That's correct.
And did we, how much of our legal did we spend, or is that lumped together with the select board?
Yes, that's in the select boards. It's in here, but there's no numbers
Okay,
for any of the past, at least 4 years.
okay. Mary?
So can you backtrack, when did the budgets combine?
For next year, they'll combine for next year.
So did FinCom discuss this? I haven't heard that yet.
I'm not sure whether FinCom, but I've discussed it with the chairs of the 3 boards, as well as Concom and now Planning Board.
Greg, do you have any comment about when the FinCom has or will review, maybe if you're. Oh, he is being.
Yeah, we haven't set that schedule yet. It'll be sometime late January, early February.
Okay, great.
And then, so you're currently the conservation agent?
No. So we have a part-time conservation agent who started a few weeks ago. I mean, I was filling in doing what I can, but I am not a trained conservation agent.
Okay, so they hired somebody.
Yes, but
Okay.
we have hired somebody.
Okay, no, I was just hearing that you were the replacement conservation agent, so I was gonna ask how that worked.
Another,
Temporary.
another app.
Super temporary.
Okay. Great, thank you. Any other budget thing we should focus? Do you need any action from us, Greg or Mark?
No.
Okay, great, thank you. Nice to get an update. Then current status, one of the things that I just got today was a request for doing the annual report. So I will put together a draft and share it out with try to share it out. Mark and I'll put together a draft and share it out and see what comments. That's due in mid-January. But I think the chair usually just does it for the board. Okay, counting case. What do you have there?
Well, this
Okay,
is the list of topics if people didn't have it with them.
I can read that one. so.
Okay. But if someone wanted just to have it in front of you. You want one? Mary? Okay. So I put together this list of possible topics to kind of for this spring's fall town meeting and perhaps the fall as well, and then and beyond.
Mark, is it a different list than what's in the folder?
No, it's the same,
Okay.
same one. I just didn't know who had it. So I tried to put the things that were I felt was most important or kind of essential to discuss under spring at town meeting, and that's like 6 or 7 items. So So one is, so we've discussed some of these before. One is the accessory dwelling unit. In order to update the rules that we have to comply with the state statute. So one thing is, in addition to the changes they made to 3A, requiring accessory dwelling units by right, they are also adopting regulations through EOHLC for these, and they were just released on Friday. So I have not looked at them.
They're a draft, right?
Yes, it's a
Same
draft.
kind of thing. I mean, it's
Okay.
fine, it's fine.
They're fine, okay.
I mean,
They're involved.
overall, they're
They're
fine.
mostly involved.
So whatever we put together, we'll have to make sure they comply with both of the items. We will do that. One thing that keeps coming up as it relates to that is short-term rentals, and we'll have to look at how we're allowed to regulate that under the accessory dwelling unit bylaw, and we are. But again, we have to look to make sure we do it correctly, so.
I have a question on that. Can the select board just make changes to what they want to propose for the short-term rentals at next town meeting?
We discussed it. Various members of the select board had concerns about commercial ownership of short-term rentals, commercial ownership of rental property in general. There was a feeling that our current short-term rental bylaw is restricted to a very short period of time. And that in fact, the state allows you to consider short-term rental up to about a month. And that perhaps our bylaw should reflect that rather than restricting itself to less than a week. There was strong feeling on the part of the select board that ADUs should not be allowed to be short-term rentals, that the purpose of having them is to increase the amount of housing. The thought of the board was that it would be a good idea to put together a small group, 3 people probably, from the planning board, the ZBA, and the select board to consider this and come up with something that we could pass at the town meeting in April that would prevent people from turning ADUs into short-term rentals and therefore grandfathering them. And that perhaps the larger questions around ADUs and short-term rentals needed a little more thought than was going to be available between now and March. So the select board would like to see someone from the planning board, first the planning board's endorsement of a small group to focus on this rather than putting it on your already busy agendas. And second, if you agree that that's an approach, you should think about which member would like to be involved in that.
So would we do, oh, I'm sorry. So would we do short-term bylaw changes and ADU at the same town meeting?
This would be my feeling at the moment, the idea is that the group would decide. But in order to get something together in a couple of months, 3 months, that it might be wise just to consider the intersection of ADU and short-term rental. And then have a plan for something for the fall town meeting that would elaborate on that and deal with wider concerns.
But we have to make, well, I sent around a seminar that I think tomorrow and next Monday on ADUs. I'm gonna try to go to that.
I'm gonna do next one.
And so then we'll be better informed about ADUs, or I will anyway, or hopefully. That's the first thing, and then presumably our existing ADU bylaw does not comply with the new statute. So it probably just needs to be deleted, and it seems to me it makes sense to do them at the same time. It's not that complicated. Right, so
If it's just deleting. But
well,
if you want to advance it so that you can have larger ADUs or ADUs in different areas, then I think
you're saying.
that's my concern is
We need to understand the
mission creep.
issue.
Well, we're currently exposed, right? So we need to abide by the state ADU bylaw. Will come February. And that's for the 900 square feet in single-family districts. And so are you proposing that you want it beyond single-family districts and larger than 900?
I'm proposing that we, for April, consider only limiting the use of ADUs to residents. And that we take on the larger questions of what we want. We obviously have to follow the state law. And do we want something beyond that, I think is a larger question. Can be deferred.
My personal opinion on that one, not that anybody cares, but I think that we would be exposed for a long time if we waited till the next fall meeting.
Exposed in what way?
Because we can put restrictions on that the state hasn't, with like height and things like that. So I think and short-term rentals, et cetera. So I think if we're gonna go down that path anyway, we should do it sooner rather than waiting for 2 town meetings. That's my personal opinion.
So you're suggesting that we take up the totality of the ADU issue in addition to the short-term rental prohibition?
That would be my suggestion. I mean, again, the ADU isn't all that complex. It's, we've drafted it many times and put it on the shelf. So with the state pretty much dictating what they want, and then we can just put further restrictions on it or additions, but,
I mean, I kind of agree that you ought to have something in place for ADUs that at the bare minimum matches what the state law allows. And then you can put your restrictions on for the short-term rentals within that. However you feel it should be crafted. So it kind of also times up with the general bylaw on ADUs, any changes to that, so they kind of blend. And then, like Ian was saying, is that if you want to allow larger ADUs or in other districts or in other types of buildings that may not be covered by the bylaw, that's for a longer discussion, because we have beyond town meeting. In other words, let's get past, review and pass what we need to in order to adjust our bylaw and comply. And then we can discuss, because we have a number of other things that we need to work on for the springtime as well.
I'm just gonna stop here and clarify for our guests that ADUs are accessory dwelling units, which are like small apartments in a existing dwelling, in existing building, like for your grandmother or something like that.
well, it could be detached with the.
It can also be detached, right? So, but ADU means accessory dwelling unit.
So I agree, we should do something by April, and I think it's worth trying to just get a final product.
I agree.
Because things are gonna keep coming up. It's not that complicated. There are some towns have already, I did do a seminar today. I don't know if anyone else did, the MAPC. I mean, the HLCs will be much more on point, but still, it isn't that difficult. And the additional factors for our town to consider, I mean, it's a small list. It's not, do we want to go bigger? Do we want some places to be able to have two. I think I know the answer to both those things already, but it's a pretty short list of sort of additional things that we would be considering in drafting it, I think.
So I think it's a great idea. Having worked on this for a couple of years, even the simplest decisions can be very controversial.
Really?
Now we So I think you agree that we should try to get a final
We should
product.
try, absolutely.
And if the select board and the ZBA and wants to work together, that seems like a
Yeah.
good idea. And I would suggest that at our next meeting, we have just a working discussion about ADUs. Make sure everybody knows what the state law is. What the list of issues are that we have some wiggle room in, and talk through our intent. We sometimes have started with a draft bylaw, and then we get stuck because we get in minutia, but I'd like to suggest that on this topic, we start with sort of a consensus, yes, no, on each of the various approaches, and then try to boil it down and then hand it off to Jonathan and Michelle and Mark to write it, to get an outcome that is, that meets that consensus. It may not please everybody, and we advance it. And I think there is agreement, could be wrong, but I suspect that there is agreement that ADUs are for housing, not for short-term rentals. I think we can have a discussion about that, make sure that my assessment is correct, but it sounds to me that's what the select board's consensus is. Very much, and I know Sarah Melish has articulated that a number of times, so seems to me there's agreement on that point.
It's the rest of it that worries me with the deadline of March.
Let's give it a shot and see where we are and how much consensus we have, and that we could also break it into two, they could be two articles. One is prohibition of ADUs for short-term rental, and then a separate one that makes the other changes on some of these other parameters. They could be for the purposes of getting the short-term rental issue passed. That could be one section, and then it could be, as Sue says, the finished product. So, okay. Well, let's go through the rest of Mark's list. We don't have to solve the ADU question right now.
It'd be nice to solve it soon, because.
Right, but we don't have to, we're not gonna do, so you want a person that will start working on it? Is that what you're looking for between now and?
I'm not looking for anything between now and January, but I would like to start. Sorry, I'm talking here as politician. I like to put things in front of town meeting that I think will pass. I don't like to put things in front of town meeting that people haven't had a chance to hear about and think about. And I don't like going to town meeting with the boards divided on a position. And that's, but I agree that your board has to agree on at least the direction.
Or have consensus. Sometimes don't all.
Okay, but.
Okay.
Well, one thing we could do is, make it more public than just, here's our agenda for the next planning board meeting, but, make it clear to the residents, hey, this next planning board meeting, we're gonna be talking about this new ADU law. I mean, not in those words,
And why wouldn't we
obviously,
just
but-
use the template that you created for 3A for communication? I mean, it worked beautifully. I mean, people
Well,
are
that was
now.
18 months. This is.
No, I know, but I think you got it to the point where residents are aware now of where information lives and,
I would say-
I think we can do some of the things.
Right.
Not all the things.
Right.
But
Right,
we can do
right.
some of the things, we can create something for the planning boards, upcoming zoning changes for Springtown meeting, and have a a section where
Yeah.
we list all of those items as we work through them. Because, I mean, we're still only talking about the first item.
Right.
And we have like
Okay.
probably 6 things that you're gonna all, or 5 of them that you're gonna agree are important that we probably should try and do for Springtown meeting. So you're gonna want the publicity so that people will know about it, and B, we have stuff that, and some of it's also important, just like the ADUs. Some of it maybe you can pass, but the next one's also very important, which is the floodplain bylaw. They're gonna be releasing new regulation, a model regulations as well as new maps fairly soon. They haven't done either yet. Once they do, we're gonna have, again, just a few months in order to make any tweaks to it. We can't probably do very much, kind of like the stormwater bylaw, that was a model bylaw. But we will do what we need to do, publicize it, and hopefully move it forward so people can continue to get flood insurance.
Is there a way to do the flood bylaw like we did with the stormwater, where the authority to write regulations is given to planning board, and that, so that we don't have to go to town meeting every time they change? Or does it have to be
I
in?
don't think it's a bylaws like that. It's more bylaw to comply with the federal flood insurance rules. I mean, I think when they release the model, we'll know for sure, but usually it's, you adopt a specific bylaw, and there's no need to adopt additional regulations.
Okay.
Because there's building code regulations, because it really relates to building. So if you're building in these various zones, you need to elevate the first floor, elevate, utilities and other types of like heating systems and other things out of the flood zone to minimize damage. And, again, it depends on where you are. So I don't think towns really write additional regulations.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, it sounds scripted. Can I ask a question on that? Does there need to be a comment period for the new maps coming out?
that's usually they have comment periods when they release those, and oftentimes they become quite controversial. I know when I was in another community, they released them and it was a big to-do, and they didn't officially release them and waited another year or 2 before they did. So I don't know what's gonna happen when they release them for this area, so.
Yeah, so the reason I ask is just that we have to buffer that into the schedule.
Yeah,
That,
I know.
and the hearings around that.
Could I suggest that a subgroup, like Ann suggests for the ADU, be put together to work on the flood?
Well, I think that we're not gonna have that many, I don't anticipate any new applications. You're gonna have one on January 13th, you just finished another one, and we finished CST. So I would rather have this group in order, rather than have little groups. This is what my observation was before, when I first got here, is you had individual members or 2 members working on something, and then not everyone's aware of kind of the steps and the progress and understanding each of the elements. So I would prefer to have us have work sessions for our meetings, and if it takes 2 or 3 hours to review our list of 5 things or whatever it is, to go through the drafts.
Why don't we keep, instead of worrying about the process right now, why don't we keep, so we understand the list, and then we can come back to process.
Okay.
So floodplain, we understand that. Zoning introduction, haven't we rewritten that already? Isn't that done?
So the zoning introduction was rewritten when you did the recodification. but there's a couple problems with it. First off, it reiterates the law. So if the law changes, now your introduction is wrong. And that was what happened with 3A. Under your introduction, it says you have to have a 2/3 vote. Well, actually, that's wrong now. So at the very least, that needs to get removed. But there's a lot of other things in the law, and I don't really think, you know, zoning needs big, long introductions.
Can you or Copeland and Page do that one?
Yeah, I think we can draft something
It
to,
doesn't seem like it's terribly controversial.
no. But
So-
it's, again, it's something that should be at a minimum adjusted.
So why don't we, okay, so I wasn't gonna talk about process, sorry. Okay, D2 zoning clarification.
So, so the D2 zone is this zone that runs up Pine Street and across Pleasant, and what, down School, I believe. And it's, so the way it currently is, maybe not how it used to be, but it's currently an undefined zone. It's shown on a map, but that map has no dimensions. Whether it goes 100 feet back from the edge of the right of way, the center line of the road. Also, there's no written description. And then is it an overlay district or is it an underlying district? So that needs to be clarified. And so what we need to do is look back at what it was and decide whether we want to fix it or as
Get rid of
somebody.
it.
That was what someone else suggested, was to remove it in its entirety.
We'll just combine D1 and D2 as a D district.
Okay, I haven't looked at what the differences
what it was.
are between the various regulations.
D2 requires a special permit
Mhm.
and D1 does not,
Yeah,
um,
for a two-family.
for a two-family. Might be controversial to just wipe that slate clean.
Mhm.
So are you saying in the recodification, the definition, because it was defined in our own old bylaws, the 100 feet,
That's why I
the
asked.
westerly, the easterly, the this, the that.
Mhm.
So
So that's.
that could be either put
So
back
it
in or.
needs either to
Okay, so we
get
need to
put
workshop
back
that.
in slightly differently, or just get rid of the entire D2 zone. But the question is that in and of itself going to be controversial because there are always people who live around here who, along those streets in particular, who.
Well, I mean, the other way is you could take that new district and make the conversion of one family into two family a special permit. You could go, instead of getting
Illusory
more
district.
lenient. So the point is we need to have a conversation about what we want, okay?
And I know we don't want to get down in details, but what triggered this for special town or for, special town meeting was that it has to address what's the underlying district in that. It's not just defining D2, it's what's the,
Yeah, is D2 an overlay or is it an underlying district? So
Yeah,
we need to clarify that as well as the dimensions of the district.
Can I just ask one more question? Because I obviously was not here when D2 was codified. What was the intent of D2?
I can answer that. I wasn't here either, but I did a lot of research on it. And I have all the microfiche practically, but it was intended that it was gonna create in-law apartments. And the kids moving home, all the things that people still quote today of happening. That was its intent.
So it was to change single family to multifamily.
Not two-family.
Two-family.
It was taking a section of town and saying, we want to allow, the age in place, kids moving home. Parents move on this side, kids live on the other side. That was the intent.
So
I think what happened was there's the D district, which allowed two-family by right.
Okay,
Then somebody, as Mary pointed out, said, well, it'd be great to extend that along Pleasant Street and along Pine Street to allow those houses to become two-family. But then people said, well, we can't do that by right, so let's just do that by special permit. So the D1 and the D2 were created.
Or the T2 was pretty.
Well, D1, they were separated out of the D.
So D was just D and then it became D1.
Yes, exactly.
Because D2 came into existence.
Exactly.
but D2 was, it was a new option to an area that had only been single family before. Is
Yes.
that
I
correct?
believe,
Okay,
I don't quote me on that, but that's what I believe it was.
And that's why the overlay versus underlying, because D2 sits inside D1.
No, so
No.
Are they separate?
D2 is sitting on,
Usually District B and some of
A,
A.
Some of G.
Oh, that's,
Some of G.
sure.
So
Sounds simple.
most of the lots, yeah, are not just in one district,
Yeah.
it's in two districts, and
Yeah.
that gets back to the.
Right.
okay, thank you.
The next one isn't a zoning change, but it is something that we should do, and so maybe it's may not have a long discussion, but it is our fees for our rules and regs. So for example, a filing fee for a special permit like we had tonight, filed the same filing fee that CST did for a special permit. So fees are supposed to represent kind of the cost of doing business for the town. You know, the extra review, extra studies that need to get reviewed or paid for by the applicant is outside of that. So typically there's some sort of scale for projects, particularly for like site plan review based on the size of the project, whether it's by acreage or something along those lines. So I'm gonna try and sneak those in somehow. It hopefully shouldn't be a big.
so we don't need to go to
discussion.
town meeting for that.
You don't need to go to town meeting,
Just the
but it
public
is
hearing.
And
something.
Mark,
that-
you must have examples of that from previous places
Oh,
where you
yes.
worked, right? Yeah.
But I think it would be nice to update them in particular for special permits and site plans.
So we've worked pretty hard on redoing the regulations in general, and I don't know how far much more work it is to do, but there are drafts available that maybe we should all take a look at and implement.
Well, I don't know that we've ever officially adopted the rules and regulations.
No, we haven't.
Well,
That's not, we have adopted some of them, but I would say that they were a bit of a mess. Remember, there was the restating of all of
Yeah,
the statute,
Yeah, yeah.
and so I'm not sure. There may be some,
I would not want to get into redoing your rules and regs. I'm just saying your fees.
let's start with
For
fees,
right
right?
now, just so in case we do get some larger applications that do require staff
I
time.
don't object to doing fees, but I don't think we need to.
The other thing
Kick
we
the
might,
can.
we wanna think about is the fees for these CHOD and the site plan review for the CHOD, so that should be included in.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
so can you just draft something and,
Yep.
and we'll,
So Mark, aren't some of the fees in the bylaws? Don't they have to match what's in the bylaw?
Well, now, usually bylaws, I don't know whether in the zoning there's any specific fees. Most of our fees are actually in.
Like, I
Fees
think
are
select board
addressed,
set
so your
fees.
subdivision rules and regs are part of your fees, part of your planning board rules and regs.
The fees.
In there, that's, I believe, where your fees are.
Yeah,
So it's, I'm just looking at 12.4.4, which is. The planning board may adopt reasonable administrative fees and technical review fees for applications for special permits. And site plan review as specified in general laws 40A, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So it sounds like I think there used to be specific fees.
Okay, yeah.
And I think we changed it to that language. So that's good, we don't have to make that change.
Right.
So I think if you can draft the fee schedule and make a recommendation, then let's get it on a calendar and do it.
So,
So you mentioned this, but, so our subdivision rules and regs, one question, how often should those be updated? Two, I think we have a lot of junk in them that was adopted into other things, so that needs a big overhaul.
Yeah.
yes, I'm sure they do, but I think given the, level of subdivision plans being submitted and all the other tasks that we have to do, I say we can add that to 2026 and
I
beyond.
wrote that too.
But I mean, you are correct that they probably should be rewritten. At least cleaned up. So then the other thing was I just put down a catch-all for other cleanup, zoning clear up or clarifications from the recodification. So if there are other things that people know that got dropped, that are confusing because of they weren't picked up when they rewrote certain sections or even just a paragraph.
Well, there, I
We
think there are
should, we
two.
should put a list
There-
together.
There's a long list. I actually have a long list
Okay.
elsewhere, but I think there are two, one which is probably a hot potato and one which I think is easy. The easy one that I'd like to see us do is alternates for special permits. And I was trying to look to see if if the chapter 48 allows us to do alternates for site plan review as well.
Well, so
But
we can explain that.
Well,
So
we just special
I've adopted it both ways in different communities. And so the legal advice given to the last town I was in was that you can only do it for special permits. In the past, though, in Foxborough, I did it for all planning board items because you're not restricted, but the state law says you can only do it for special permits. So it just allows you to do it. So you can still authorize yourself to do it for other things. So
yeah, my rationale here is if we think about the the cell signaling, had they not been willing to restart, they would have been constructively approved. Because Christine retired, Ron passed, and
We didn't have a quorum.
and who,
And Gordon and Peter.
Karen, yeah, so, you know, and if somebody misses one, I can't remember the situation, but anyway, you need a super majority. The other thing is with, we need to be ready for these, for the multifamily site plan review. We have to do it in a timely way. And again, if they have, if we have a couple of these things in a row, and, you know, somebody's sick or has to leave the board for some reason, I think having alternates. Again, we have drafted that, already.
Yeah.
So
just
it's pretty simple. I think the issue that we stumbled over was the appointing process. That was where we got stuck. So,
what's the other issue?
oh, the other issue is section 7. The non-conforming uses is, I think we need to just have some attorney tell us if it's not Mark Bobrowski. Take a look at that, because it's super confusing.
Okay.
This is the,
So this is just what we had before.
yeah, we didn't ever change it. But
Okay, so this isn't a cleanup.
yeah, this is, it never got changed, but we did have,
So that's your very old version that stayed the same.
this is the same in section 7. But I think the issue is when a non-conforming use is changed to another use, another non-conforming use. And it's less detrimental to the neighborhood. Case law says that it can be advanced, and this says, I'm not sure what this says.
I think it says it can be too, but
I think it says it can be too, but it's,
it's.
I just think it's way worth it to have.
Non-conforming structure, not use.
correct. So I think that's a pretty simple, like, maybe we should have KP Law look at it. Because that did come up and it was a big, potential vulnerability for the town, I think. So that one to me is just, maybe we just have KP Law make a recommendation to us, and,
And I think it was brought to town meeting probably like 5 years ago. And we voted
before
yeah.
I was, yeah, I think Gary Gilbert tried to bring it.
Okay.
So, and alternates. I'm not sure the section 7 is urgent enough to rise to the April town meeting level.
No.
But I think alternates, to me, it's
Well,
not,
that's
to me, it's a
usually-
no-brainer, but, that's just me.
Okay. So if there's no other clarifications, but you can bring up,
I'll look up the
yeah, you
list.
can bring up other issues at the next meeting.
Yeah.
Have time. Under site plan review, the way it's applied here is a little odd because it's applied if you are gonna need more than 5 new parking spaces. So if you're tearing down a building or building something new and it doesn't need more than 5, then it doesn't apply. So that's kind of odd. So generally, it's based on a certain square footage of either land alteration or the size of a new building. So let's say 1,500 square foot commercial building or a multifamily dwelling, are usually it's some sort of minimum commercial size and usually multifamily dwellings, which is 3 or more. In a lot of towns are what kicks off site plan review. So I would recommend that we look at changing that as well. So. So those are the ones that are on this list.
Did you at the last meeting discuss the design review committee?
We did,
Yes.
he's asked Greg to, put it in the paper for people who are
Oh,
interested.
okay, great, okay.
So, and so then we have, so there's one other one that kind of came up as a little bit of a discussion, and I know it's gonna, and I'm gonna be talking with the Downtown Improvement Committee about it, because, it came up Friday. About maybe doing, even though we've talked about, and I've talked about with the Downtown Improvement Committee and several other boards about doing a comprehensive look at the general district, everything from streetscapes to zoning to the district boundaries. And our general district is quite large. It runs all the way from Boat Yards all the way up across downtown Summer Street and into some residential neighborhoods. To look
Isn't
at.
there another piece way down by,
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
Magnolia.
Magnolia, yeah.
yeah,
There's
Oh,
a
yeah.
small piece in there, so, there was a bit of a kind of a preliminary discussion about, well, should we do something for a mixed, like a small overlay mixed use district for the downtown area for now, until such time as we get funding to do a bigger study of the general district, because that study would take a long time, and in order to kind of preserve some of the commercial property and enhance the kind of the storefront and still allow some residential in some manner. So I just wanted to kind of toss that out there, because that may or may not be something that we would want to discuss. From a purely putting something together, it's not that difficult. create an overlay district map using the GIS like we did for the thing. Writing the rules for an overlay district is not particularly difficult. We can refer to the design review committee that's in the CHOD for building review and building design. So procedure would be site plan review. So again, we have many of the steps in place. It's just, is that something that if there's enough support, do we want to kind of jumpstart it a little bit? You know, and again, it may or may not be some reasons to do it. So moving forward.
I think it's a good idea.
How is it different than what's currently there?
So right now, if someone wants to take the building, let's say the bank building, and knock it down and build a couple residential units, they can't. So you lose the commercial property. The other thing is then from a purely a downtown improvements perspective, you want to do something to knit the two little commercial cores we have together and not lose another piece in the middle. So if the bank building gets knocked down and residential goes in, and they sell 2 condos there at $2 million, that's the way it's going to be forever. That's not going to change. So now you've lost the ability to make that connection between the commercial out front of town hall and the commercial.
And then, and then it isolates the businesses that are on the ends of that
Right.
connection.
Yeah, so, and there are a few other properties where that possibly could happen. So I think at least having those discussions and putting something together, whether we bring it forward or not, is might be, because in all the, it was something that was discussed during our MBTA, and we purposely kept the MBTA out because we weren't able to require first floor commercial. And so it became a topic of discussion, which is why we pulled it out. And it's not from a crafting zoning, it's not a particularly difficult task. And if we just took a core section of the downtown, let's say from the gas station up to Seaside 1, or Pine Street, and just take the core area, I think it would be something that many people, if not most people, would be supportive of.
Hey, Mark, this is Gordon. What would it take to move this forward?
Well, this board, and putting a proposal together and reviewing it and working with the Downtown Improvement Committee as well. I think they should be involved in the Historic District Commission because portions of the downtown are within the District Commission, but I think it ought to be led by the board.
So I'm gonna now talk a little bit about process. And rather than having small groups, I'm gonna suggest that Mark and I put together a calendar that says we're gonna workshop these issues to see if we have consensus about the direction. And if we have consensus about the direction on some of these, the downtown, the ADUs, alternates, and sounds like we're waiting for floodplain for somebody else to tell us what the model is, but maybe those three, we kind of workshop at our next meeting. I can sort of, lead us through with sort of some white paper and say, do we have consensus on these are the big issues? And then have, rather than us trying to, as we did when Sue was here, the board kind of took the lead on language. I think we have Mark and we have town council who can take our intent and put it into a bylaw, and then we can review it and decide if we're gonna bring it forward and hopefully be a little bit more streamlined as a process.
I like that a lot for process. I think it sounds much more efficient and maybe we could know sooner. Are we all kind of pulling in the same direction or do we need to course correct and make some adjustment together and talk that through? I think that's great. And I also think we'd get more consistency of language and intent if kind of one person with, subject matter expert is writing it. I found it really difficult and just downright unproductive at times to be trying to write zoning language together, from, starting from zero, basically, so.
Right.
And I will say, when you first started talking about the downtown plan and rezoning, I thought, it seems interesting, but as soon as you sort of put it in those stark terms about you could really hollow things out here, I think that sounds, urgent, and we should be taking a look at that. We need critical mass in our commercial zone.
Can I just ask a clarifying question on the floodplain bylaw? The model 2024 still holds, right? We're just getting new maps. The state isn't issuing a new model bylaw.
I don't know.
Okay, I think it's just still the model 2024.
Yeah.
And it's just the maps that we were waiting on.
Yeah.
So is the model
don't-
bylaw, just something we adopt?
Yeah, and we tweak it, like we need to designate who's gonna be the floodplain administrator. And we need to say, there's certain things, there's like, maybe a half dozen that get, what's the word? That get
Where we have
customized for Manchester. But yeah, the model bylaws right out on the state. Oops.
At the last workshop I attended, it sounded like they're gonna reissue, maybe tweak it a little bit. There may be some additional changes. I'm not entirely sure, but they were like, well,
Okay, so then
we're gonna be re-releasing the actual bylaw, so.
And then to Anne's earlier point about being successful at town meeting, if there's a zoning bylaw that the state has that's a model bylaw around a complicated subject, I think the town is generally willing to say, and this helps people get flood insurance.
Yes.
That seems to be important and relatively easy to be successful at town meeting. I think personally, I know we haven't workshop, had consensus, but I think that the ADU being for residents, not for short-term rentals, seems pretty straightforward. And I think the commercial one seems to me to be pretty straightforward too, but I might be surprised on that one. So.
Okay.
So
I think we can be
Can I
successful.
ask one other question about 3A
Mm-hmm.
and what is there anything that needs to be done to prepare for that?
Well, I think, one is getting our design review committee appointed. So, because that's an important part, so we still they're required to file site plan review. Obviously, if we can adjust our fees, that would be helpful, because just the staff time to administer stuff is more than what we currently charge. And then, and really, and that's all we need to prepare, because there's the design review for the building, there's the site plan review with the planning board, whereby you review both the site and the design, and then you approve it and move it forward with extra conditions, so.
And has it been sent to the
So it
EOHLC or?
is,
and-
has not been sent to EOHLC, hopefully by the end of the week. It'll be sent, so.
What about the Attorney General?
Same thing, by the,
Town clerk sends it to the
yeah,
AG.
town clerks, I reviewed kind of the checklist with her today, so.
So there's nothing in this urgent group here that we need to.
We'll appoint the site, the
design.
design review.
Design, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right.
So it sounds like number one on 2026 and beyond is moving up.
Well-
Oh, sorry, that's not what you were just talking about.
Yeah,
What was the name
not-
of the thing you were just talking,
So that would be just a mixed use
mixed use,
overlay district.
mixed use overlay district. Okay.
Right, in other words, if we did the downtown comprehensive plan and rezoning, a small piece of that would be the mixed use overlay
Yeah.
district. But I think given the fact that we're gonna be trying to apply for a grant to do that. Which means it would be a 2026 project starting in January of 2026. We wouldn't be adopting changes for another year, or, you know, maybe some
Yeah.
zoning first. It depends how you organize that project, so. So that's why I think maybe just jumping ahead a little bit, just so that you don't, because I've seen that where towns are happy something's happening, but then in the short term, but in the long term, they're like, yeah, you know, probably shouldn't allow it.
So, what I'm gonna suggest is, for our next meeting, that, maybe I'll put a note right in the next meeting, or maybe you can put a note in the next meeting folder. We don't think we have to put the, zoning, the ADU zoning, but just put a thing, it's a reminder, review ADU zoning portions of the bylaw.
We'll study
Yeah,
it.
so what I'll do
Homework.
is.
that noted.
And then.
But I put it in the meeting folder for January, like we're gonna have a 2025 meeting folder, January, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because I think people will jog us, our memory as we prepare for them. Everybody's really good at, this is an amazing group. Everybody reads stuff in advance, which is great.
We'd read more too if we had it. Just saying.
Move we adjourn.
Yeah.
So those are, there's a section in table 4, and then there's, what is it, 9.2 or 9 point, whatever. That's the one that I think is. Anyway,
Well, we should probably put the state.
yes.
Yeah, that
in
would be
the-
helpful.
Yeah.
All right, I don't know if you want to go through the rest of these. The only thing I was thinking that we definitely probably should do is we're successful at moving most of these forward for the spring is for over the summer, pick up the senior housing, because that is kind of important, but I think we should simplify. I haven't seen what was talked about before, but I think we ought to try and maybe work on this one project. And focus on it and try and get something passed, even if it's a little simpler and a little less, so that it's not controversial. And you kind of, you know, cherry pick the low hanging fruit, so to speak, of things that you think.
Yeah, that's, we had a subgroup and we had actually identified, I think, 3 different people and had, our next step was to bring them in to talk about some senior housing that had been done in other communities so that we could kind of learn from that, which might be a way to start with that if we wanted. I'm sure we could go back and.
What's
have
the status of that? Is it still, where are we? Going on back here? Is that?
Senior
housing.
Oh, you're talking senior center.
Yeah.
Senior center.
Completely, okay, all right.
Yes, makes sense, yeah.
They can't live in the center.
Well,
Not they, we.
No.
I can't.
Well, they should be able to add units to it.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to go through the others or not really. I mean, I don't think anything on the 2026 and beyond really floats to the surface, given all the other things you have to do in a short time
I
period.
did add, I think Mary's point to add subdivision rules and regs, just,
It is,
is it on there?
yeah. Rules and regs for planning, well.
Yeah,
oh,
I
update-
think subdivision rules and regs should be on that
Yeah, it
list.
is, update and clarify the subdivision control.
Oh,
bylaw.
okay, sorry, I was looking for subdivisions, the first word. I think they're kind of explanatory, and I'm hoping the historic commission is gonna deal with the demolition delay. We had asked them to do that. And they were going to, but. I don't know.
It's kind of been discussed very briefly, but I don't know where it's at right now. No.
But by the time you meet again, I will.
Okay.
Laura,
So,
Cluster zoning was in our future parking lot.
Correct.
26 and beyond.
the residential
It's a good
cluster, that
Yeah.
was definitely,
So maybe that
and
could be
again, we have a draft. of
beyond
that
list.
Residential cluster. I'll look at the list from before.
Yeah.
was kind of a
Mark, you
cluster.
know what's going in the cargo building?
But,
The cargo building?
oh, that's perhaps someone's thinking about putting in a couple residential units, so, and taking that down. So that would be another reason um, to do this overlay district.
But did you, because they went in front of the historic commission, didn't they?
Yes. The historic can give them guidance on how to adjust the building. But they can only, give them guidance, and eventually if they bring something forth that they've been told to do, they have to make a decision, so, and they cannot kind of delve into the zoning aspect of it.
Is there a change of use issue?
Well, that's what, in discussing with Sarah Miller, she feels that it's, even though it's from one permitted use to another, that it, still requires a special permit. But again, we haven't really seen concrete plans, so, again, it's another reason to look at this overlay district.
Well, probably require a special permit just because of setbacks and non-conforming and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen what was proposed to the historic commission. I was told it wasn't like a fully designed site plan. It was a site plan and a concept plan kind of thing, and some elevation, but, yeah.
Okay, great. We don't have any minutes yet, right?
No. Yeah.
Okay, so we are that will help us, move along. Okay. Next meeting is if we can get those minutes and get them read before and then I've lost my agenda here, so, are there any other?
Here's your agenda.
Oh, thank you.
Public comment.
Well, this minute, public comment, thank you. Any public comment? Hearing none?
Just a question on the calendar, so it says upcoming meeting January 13th, and then does that start the every other week sequence?
Yes,
The
except
regular,
is Martin Luther King. That's not the,
so that's an off week?
yeah. So the 13th, the 27th. Sometimes we run into President's Day.
Yeah.
And then it's a Tuesday. It's the 10th, is that President's Day, or is the
No, I
7th?
don't think so. It's the following,
The 17th is President's Day,
probably, yeah.
Yes, it is.
okay.
Okay, so the 13th starts the rhythm. That's my question.
Great, thank you.
So we're on Christmas break.
We are.
Non-denominational break,
Yeah.
whatever it might be.
Holiday.
Yeah, holiday break.
Yeah, we are on break. We've gotten a lot done this year. Thank you, everybody, and I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Uh,
All right, Gordon,
Holidays.
don't get hurt.
thank you, Sarah, thank you.
I know how it is.
All right, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Greg.
Greg.